Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here, and today you are one of 5 possible tribes, each bringing their most brilliant strategies, ancient gifts, and warriors to win the day. Because when the peoples of the earth and their gods wish to show their skill, triumph, and champion their causes, they no longer spill their blood on the battlefields of the world. Instead, they ascend to the fields of the gods, finding the ancient game of Mitropia, which allows them to test their courage and fortitude. Mitropia is a multiplayer territory capture game in which you place warriors and modify their behaviors with special powers, all overlaid on game mechanisms based on the ancient game of Go. It's for 2 to 5 players, plays in 45 to 90 minutes, for ages 12 and up, and published by Time Warp Labs. It's going on Kickstarter in the spring of 2020, and I'm going to show you how the game works, and I'll see you on the other side. This is a Kickstarter preview, so all the art and components you see here are not final, they're prototype. And to see the final art and components, when this Kickstarter goes live in the spring of 2020, there'll be a link below this in the description of the video, and that will take you directly to the Kickstarter project page, where you can see all the final art and components. At the beginning of the game, each player gets to select a color, which also is associated with a specific tribe, and each of the tribes have some special abilities for them. There's actually 5 to choose from. Here's the board set up for 3 players. You'll use a certain amount of tiles and a certain amount of specific tiles of each type for each player count. But once you have those tiles, the way they're laid out in a grid is randomly picked. Now, you will start in the middle, then put tiles around, and then tiles around until you run out of the tiles, but where the tiles are completely random each game. Now, at the beginning of the game, each player is going to place their chieftain, and in this prototype, we're just using 2 tokens stacked on top of each other. Again, when the Kickstarter goes live, check the link in the description of this video to see what they're using for the chieftain tokens. Then, depending on the amount of players, you may place a certain amount of warriors. In a 3-player game, you're going to get 1 more out there. Now, there's certain placement rules as to where you can and can't place at the beginning of the game. But there's some strategies to where to go, but there's also some restrictions as well. The object of the game is to have the most points. Now, I've set up some warriors here from the red team just to give you some examples. You'll get a point for every terrain tile, which are just the ones with the forest here and these normal looking ones here. You'll get a point for every one that you occupy, like this. So this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points. If you get onto a strategic location that looks like this, those are going to be worth 3 points. You can also gain points by surrounding tiles and capturing other warriors. Now, this yellow warrior is here. Any empty space next to it is called a liberty. The more empty spaces or liberties it has, the safer it is. In this case, there's only 1 liberty left, so if a red player was able to play a warrior here, it completely surrounds this, so the red player would be able to capture this. Now, not only did it give them a point at the end of the game for this specific occupied tile, it also will get it for this one because it's completely surrounded, and you'll get a point for every one of the other opponent's warriors that you capture because you place them in front of yourself. Now, let's show you an example of a group of warriors that are here next to each other. By the way, the edge sort of allows these to have less liberties around them, or free spaces. So if a red warrior was able to go here, they completely surround this group of yellow warriors, so the red player is going to be able to capture both of these and has surrounded these. So they're going to get a point for here and these surrounded ones if this is how it looked at the end of the game. However, maybe the purple player was able to play here. Now, these warriors are still completely surrounded, but they're surrounded by more than 1 player. Since there's 2 players that have at least 1 warrior surrounding those, they get to split them. So the red player would be able to capture 1, and the purple player would be able to capture the other one. And if there had happened to have been an odd number of warriors that were surrounded, the remainder goes to the ones that actually placed the last one to cause them to be surrounded. Now, each player is going to place their mat next to the board that they're sitting next to. They're also going to get a couple of these movement cards. They'll be able to select 1 to have on their mat. We'll talk about how to use these in just a moment. Now, players will be taking turns in clockwise order, and your turn goes through 2 steps. You're going to take an action, and then essentially you're going to be discarding your cards from the deck. Now, when you're taking actions, you actually have 5 possible options. The first is to take a move, or an action move, from the card that's on your player mat. Now, the this here actually shows us the orientation of where we're moving, of where is up. So if you want to make this a little bit easier to look at, I'll also place this card just like this, just so it makes it a little bit easier for you to see this. So what it means is any warrior or chieftain that's on the board is where this is. Then I can basically place one in any of the spots that are highlighted by these little blue dots there. So for example, if we said that this was this warrior here, we could place one either 1 or 2 ahead of it. So either here or here. Now this one we could place here or here. Now by the way, if you go to one of these spots, it's a wormhole, and you immediately go to any other open wormhole and then start the card over again. So it allows you to sort of move around the board pretty quickly. Now this one would normally allow you to move over here like this to here, but these are mountains, they're obstacles. You can never go on those. However, this one could use this to go here, for example. However, instead of playing one of these, you can actually play one from the discard pile. Because there's a draw pile for those movement cards, and there's always going to be one in the discard pile. You can use the one that's here. Now I'm going to bring it closer to the board. You normally wouldn't put it there, but just to make it easier to see what you could possibly do, I'm going to bring it over there. So here's that discarded card that you don't usually put here, but this allows us to see a couple of cool things. If we want this to be this one, we could go 1, 2, which is this, and put a warrior here. Or if we're using this as the middle, we could go 1, 2, and put it here. Now this is important because if you ever, at the end of the game, if you've surrounded or occupied one of those strategic tiles, it's worth 3 points instead of just the normal 1 from the normal terrain tiles. So for example, we could just go something like that, and that essentially would be the end of our action, and we'd go to the discard phase. I'll go over that in just a moment, and then it would be the next player's turn. But let's talk about the other possibilities. You'll also have one of these in your hand, another movement card. You could play this card and actually do what it says as to the options that I showed you earlier, and then discard this card to the discard pile, which means that you're giving this as a possible option to all your opponents because it's on the top of the discard pile. Or if you really wanted to, you could play this card and put it on your mat like this, and the card that was on your mat now goes to the discard pile, and that's important because now your opponents will have the use of this card. So there's a lot of strategic choices there. And for example, if we wanted to use this card, let's say this was this warrior here, we could put one, let's just say here, for example. That's one possible way of using that card. Another possible option is to use a move based upon special cards. Everyone starts with 3 of these in their hand. They're different ones and they all do different things. And some of these cards actually allow you to combo other cards together. But let's say we played this. We could do an ambush, which allows you to make a valid legal move anywhere on the board. And your last option is just simply, if you have no legal moves or do not wish to make a move, you can just pass. Now, after you do any of those 5 options as taking an action, you then go to the discard phase. Now, if you have less than 5 cards in your hand at this point, you can draw a card from either the movement card deck or the special action card deck. And if you actually had 5 cards, you could discard one and then draw one from either of the decks. Then it'd be the next player's turn clockwise, and you keep moving like this. Now let's say we're a few turns in, and the red player put a warrior here because that strategic location's worth 3 at the end of the game if you're occupied or surrounding it instead of just 1. But the other players have sort of moved in, and let's say the purple player places 1 here. This warrior has no liberties left because it has colors of other warriors surrounding them, and this mountain is an obstacle that takes away a liberty. And since there's only 1 being surrounded, it's going to go to whoever, since there's multiple players here, it's going to go to whoever placed the last one that are surrounded. So this player, purple, will collect this, they'll capture this warrior for a point. And now this is open, and at the end of the game, if it ended like this is not even counted because it's not surrounded by just 1 player. But let's say later on the board looks like this and it's purple's turn. They can now go here because they are now closing in this, with the red player, they're closing in all the liberties of this yellow. So in this case, the red player would get this capture and the purple player would get this capture. And now this player is occupying that, which will be worth 3 at the end of the game if it's still there. Now let's talk about some of these special action cards. There's ones that say charge 1 through 4. Charge 1, charge 2, charge 3, charge 4. When you play this card, it allows you to move 1, 2, 3, or 4, depending on which of these cards you played, from any of your own warriors. Now a double strength allows you to make a normal move following one of the movement cards, but then place a second warrior right next to it. Like you could use this card to move, put 1 here, and the double strength essentially will allow you to add 1 next to it, something like that. And there's a triple strength card that does the same thing, except allows you to place 3 warriors instead of 2. Now the swift deployment allows you to essentially take an extra move, like 2 turns in a row essentially, but the 2 moves can't touch the same groups of tokens, and they both must follow the same pattern card, for example. Now, when someone plays a move, you can play a deflect card immediately, and this essentially negates or rejects that player's move. That player has to do a different move than it originally had planned. However, these deflect cards can be used in response to another deflect card. Now, when a player plays a move, you could play in reaction a subvert card. Essentially, it intercepts their move, and instead of them placing a warrior, you place it where they were about to. And then the player that originally played gets to make another move, but it has to obviously be a different move. Now, if you play the entrench card, essentially you take one of your warriors and put it on another warrior, and now this one essentially be entrenched, and you count liberties up to 2 hexes away, so it's a little bit harder to surround them. And each of the different tribes have special abilities, like the final blow. You get 10 points if your tribe plays the move in which you kill another tribe's chieftain. Now that's also one of the ways the game can end, is if you do capture another player's chieftain. And also the Master of Strategy allows you to have 1 extra card in your hand, and you're also dealt an additional special move card at the beginning of the game. Now these special abilities, the Soul Stealer, if you have captured other players, you can essentially trade this in. For each prisoner, you draw 2 cards from the draw pile and pick one, but it can only be used once per turn. Also, the Eye of the Hunter, the player can use any open pattern card from any player's board to move, not just their own. It gives them a lot of flexibility. Now, this one, the Blessings of the Mountain Spirits, your affinity for the mountain gets you 2 points for every mountain your domain touches at the end of the game. So, for instance, they have a domain that touches a mountain, that would be extra 2 points there. And Fate and Deceive, they can move any of their warriors on any turn up to 3 places in addition to other moves. So it gives them a lot of flexibility and such, but you can't cause the capture of any opposing group or warrior in the same turn. Now the game ends when either all players pass, or there's no more possible moves that can be made, or one of the chieftains get captured. Then you're going to go to and score all the territories. Again, each tile terrain that you occupy is worth 1. Everyone you surround is worth 1, unless it's one of these special strategic locations. Those are worth 3. Also, any opponents that you captured are worth a point. And then there might be some modifiers for special tribal powers and such, and whoever has the most points is the winner. And if it's tied, the player that has either occupied or surrounded the most strategic points wins. And if it's still tied between those tied players, if either of them had played in the last opening sequence wins. Well, there you have Mitropia, and as I showed in the overview, it's based off the ancient game of Go, but brings modern mechanisms like movement cards, special action cards, and asymmetric tribe-specific special powers to the table. Now, since it's launching on Kickstarter next spring, which is of 2020, you can get notified of news from Mitropia at game.mitropia.com, and you can subscribe to the Board Game Geek page for Mitropia. Now, I've placed both of those links below me in the description of this video, and I'm sure the fine folks at Time Warp Labs would love your support.